Hey guys, welcome back. This is part number 2 of the Journey Restore. Same day, just later on in the afternoon, went out and had to do a few things. Right now we're going to start sanding this cabinet down. We're going to sand it down with a 180 grit DA sander. I like to use the DA because I just have the whole setup. I have a vacuum system that kind of collects a bunch of the dust as I'm sanding, so the sander hooks up to a vacuum and to an air line. I do wear a mask while I'm doing this, just so I'm not breathing this stuff in. I probably will be fast forwarding or speeding up this as I am doing it, so you're not sitting here watching me sand the whole time. Once again, this just plugs in to my hose here. Got an air line and a vacuum hose, and when you hit the trigger, it turns the vacuum on. So I'm going to go ahead, this is 180 grit, I'm going to go ahead and start sanding this down, knocking down all the roughness and just smoothing it out so that we can find all the nicks and stuff that we have to touch up. So we'll go ahead and start sanding. Sorry about that, forgot to turn the air hose on. As I talked about earlier, the edges, I said, were kind of flaring out. You could tell where the T-mold was tapped in, just kind of flaring out. And this is just flattening it right back out. I'm probably going to switch to an 80 grit. That 180 doesn't seem to be cutting it down too quickly. So. There it is. Put on an 80 grit, see how that does. these little speckles and darker spots you see, this is all the texture from the old particle board showing through the paint. We want to try to knock that down as best as possible. We don't have to get it 100% smooth, just want to try to get it close to smooth. Once we spray filler primer on here, the filler primer will flatten out the rest of it. This sandpaper doesn't like to last as long on wood and stuff like this as it does body filler and primer. So end up using a couple more sheets of it during the process. But the nice thing is that you don't have a bunch of dust in the air, filthy, making your shop all filthy or getting it all over you. All right, now I'm going to switch up to a 220 grit and go over it one more time just to knock it down a little smoother. When you're using this sander, you want to try to keep it flat to the surface as possible. Don't put pressure or start tilting it on an angle. That'll dig right into your wood and make it, you'll see imperfections everywhere of you sanding. So let me go grab some 220 grit and we'll knock it down real quick with that. smooth enough for now. I'm gonna go ahead and do the other side off camera. No point watching me do the exact same thing on the other side. Once I get the other side sanded down, we'll come back over here and we'll figure out what nicks and scratches and stuff need to get filled in with some body filler. We'll get a little bit of that mixed up and get these filled in. So I'll be back shortly. All right, guys, I'm back. Took me about 35 minutes. I got both sides, the top and the front, sanded down. Let me show you how that stuff looks. Got the front here all sanded down. And the other side. And the top. This top really started flaking apart when I started sanding it. I'm still gonna go ahead and glue it and screw it back together, and then I'll just fill it in with some body filler. I have not sanded any of the lower, bottom, back, or anything like that yet. I'll do that later on. It's not a major thing. Now a good thing to do is to take some Safeway window cleaner and spray and wipe the cabinet down just to get off any oils or anything like that that are on the cabinet, and to get off the dust from sanding. That just gives your body filler something better to adhere to rather than dust. Safeway window cleaner works good. Doesn't have any chemicals or anything in it that are going to hurt for when you go to paint. Just lightly spray it down, nothing crazy. Take a paper towel, wipe down. You can see all the blue. Even though I just blew it off with the blowgun, there's still blue paint stuck to it. You want to get that off so that you have a good surface for your body fillers to adhere to. When I go to paint, I use a wax and grease remover, which is a chemical, and it just helps you get any wax and grease and stuff off that you had on the cabinet. But I'm just going to go ahead real quick and wipe all these surfaces down. You don't want to get it too wet because there is bare wood. You just kind of want to lightly mist it. Don't drench it because that bare wood is just going to soak it up like a sponge. Get this side real quick over here. And then we just got to wipe off the top. And you can see that's all the leftover paint that was still on the surface after blowing it off with the blowgun. Now we're going to let that dry for a minute or two. All right, I let the cabinet sit for about 10 minutes to dry. I went ahead and spun it around because I want to get these holes filled in the front here. We're going to use a dowel rod and some glue to fill those in. I have two different sizes here. This bigger one is half inch. It fits, but it's really tight, and I probably have to use my hammer to hammer it in there. And then we have this next size down here, which is a 7/16. This one slides through pretty easily. A little bit of wiggling, and in my opinion, I think that's better because I've seen guys use the thicker one and hammer it in there with a hammer with glue on it. But I think what you do in that case is when you hammer it in here with glue on it, you're kind of just squeegeeing all the glue off the dowel, and then there's really not much glue holding it on. So let me cut a couple of these pieces. I'm going to cut them a little bit long, and then I'll cut them back flush after they dry. So I just need two of them here. Now this glue works good. It's fast drying, clear weld, quick dry. Set time is 5 minutes, cures in an hour. And it's good for wood, glass, ceramic, and most plastics and stuff like that. I tend to like this stuff just because I don't have to wait around for hours for wood glue to dry. Sometimes the wood glue takes overnight to dry. So I'll go ahead and get this out and put it on the dowel rod. Make sure you use the mixing tip here. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna use it to fill these two in, and we're also gonna use it to fill that crack in on the back of the top. I'll squeeze this in there, and then I have a drill out with a countersinking bit and some screws, exterior screws that we'll use to screw it together, and that'll kind of hold it together until the glue sets up. So I'm gonna go ahead and pop this top off here. Put this mixing tip on. I don't know if you guys ever used this before, this mixing tip. It has plastic inside that's got like a wavy pattern to it. And what it does is it takes both parts of the epoxy and mixes it together as it gets to the end of the tip so that they're properly mixed together. This looks like it's a 50-50% mix. Sometimes you'll find out that one side is skinnier than the other. That's because it doesn't need as much as one as it does of the other. So now what I'm gonna do is, what I like to do is, I like to put it on the dowel itself and also try to get a little bit squeezed in the hole so that both surfaces have a coating of this epoxy on it. Takes a little bit to get it out the tube, but then just work it around the hole. And then try not to get it all over your hands. You can wear rubber gloves too. Stuff's kind of a mess. Stinks. Kind of smells like a skunk. And then jam it in there. Just get it about flush on the backside. I don't like to drive it through too far on the backside because then I got to sand it down in there. It's a pain in the butt. I probably will take a little Bondo on the backside and just kind of fill that in. I'm not sure yet if it really matters. But once again, just coat inside the hole and then coat the dowel rod. Make sure you get it all the way around it. You do have to work kind of quick because you only have a few minutes of time before this starts curing and setting up. And unfortunately, once you're done using it, this is pretty much garbage unless you have another mixing tip. I'm gonna take you around back here. We are going to work on this top part real quick, get that squeezed in there. Try to fill this in as best I can. Starting to set up already in the tube. All right. It's kind of just flaking apart this old particle board. Don't want to go crazy with it, just kind of that's a countersinking bit. I'll show it to you guys in a minute. Don't go and tighten it down real hard because it's just going to fall apart on you. Put one right over here. I can make a new top for it. I just prefer not to. The tapper cabinet I'm going to be doing in one of the next restores. We are going to have to replace the top because it's really warped, and we're also going to have to make a new speaker part on that cabinet. And once again, we'll use the black melamine that I'm going to use for the back door of this cabinet. I usually buy 4x8 sheets of it, so I have plenty left over to fix any other cabinets or parts that I need to. Now this drill bit is countersinking them into the wood so that the head of the screw is down beneath the surface of the wood, so that we can use a little filler over top. So now you can tell just by the screws themselves, this back isn't flexing in and out like it was before. Now we'll have to let this epoxy dry. I think I'm gonna put one more on that edge there. That's it. So that will kind of clamp it together while it dries. All right, that bit I was talking about is a countersinking bit. This is a number 8 bit. You can buy them at Home Depot or Lowe's. It has a little area here. This is the area that countersinks the head of the screw, and then this is just a pilot hole. The screws I like to use are, I don't use drywall screws because drywall screws don't have any shear strength. They will crack on you. These are exterior screws. They look just like a drywall screw, but they are a lot sturdier. And they just have a lot more strength to them. And they have a coating on them so they don't rust over time like regular black drywall screws will. All right, now we're done with that. What I think I'm gonna do next is I'm gonna move the cabinet around and get some body filler on some of these spots that have the bigger nicks. Mix a little bit up here. I'll probably just leave that right where it is for now. What we're gonna use for this is, a lot of the nicks are pretty minor. You know what, let's take, let me go grab a marker real quick. Maybe we'll mark some of the heavier areas with the marker just so that we could see what we're doing. Hold on one second. All right, I'm gonna go around and kind of take my Sharpie here and mark any nicks or something that I think need filled in. Just take your time, feel around. If you are using automotive body filler and primer, it's a little bit more forgiving because it's a high build primer, and it will cover and fill in minor imperfections. If you're not going that route, you'll probably want to do a little bit, more extensive work on any tiny little nicks or anything like that. This cabinet's actually in pretty good shape. Some of them I do are real bad. I never usually buy working games. Probably 95% of the games I own have been restored or fixed. I like to buy them broken. They're cheaper, and I like doing the work, so it doesn't bother me. The bottom edge of these cabinets, I still have to do some fiberglass work to it. I will be putting it on its side to do the bottoms. I kind of just like to do a bunch of it standing up if I can. This we're not going to mess with yet because that needs to dry. There is a bit of a wrinkle here, kind of a little bit of a dip on both sides. I think that's when the coin door got kicked in. They kind of bent the wood a little bit. It's still real sturdy, so I'm not going to mess with it. I'm just going to put a little bit of filler in it just to try to straighten it out. A little bit right there. I need to take a block with some sandpaper and sand that because my DA sander is round and it won't get into a square corner. If you look down here at the bottom of the front, I did do quite a bit of sanding down here. This was flared out really bad from water. This particle board's like a sponge. It just takes any moisture up right into it. So I did sand that down, so now it's nice and flat. It's not curving outwards at the bottom. You never would have saw it when that kick plate was on there. That plastic kick plate kind of covered it, but once you take it off, you see it. See, stuff like this, you can feel a little bit of a divot, so it's not a big deal. Just fill it in real quick. Down here, we need to fill in all these holes right here. If you remember earlier, I had taken that kick molding off and I pulled all the staples out. Well, obviously the staples left little holes. Chances are I'm gonna put the black molding back on. Probably should, but still nice to fill those in so you don't have to worry about them. I haven't sanded inside of any of these black areas yet. I'll get to that pretty soon here. Move you over to this side. Got a little bit to circle on this side. If you are going to use something to mark the spots that you want to fill in, don't use a grease pencil or anything like that. Make sure you use a Sharpie or a regular number 2 pencil. If you use like a grease marker or any crayon like that type stuff, it will leave like oil on your surface and stuff won't adhere. So you don't want to do that. They also sell automotive paint markers you can use as well. And I'm just getting anything big that I don't like. And we'll probably put 3 or 4 coats of filler primer on this cabinet. By doing that, it'll give it a nice heavy build of filler primer so that I can sand it down real nice and smooth and fill in any of these imperfections. Don't forget the bottom corners where I'm going to be doing some fiberglass work, where that corner in here side's kind of blown out. There's some holes right here. This is where they had that that corner protector screwed in on each side. So you got to make sure you fill in those holes too. There's just 3 on each side. This side is that whole corner is missing. We'll lay it down and get that fiberglass in. I'll show you how I do that. But I think pretty much I got all the heavy stuff filled in or marked. Get this back here. The back top up here where I had glued it. I'm not going to do any body filler right now. I want this to dry. You can see how it's getting sticky and stringy. It is setting up already. It says an hour cure time. We might not even mess with that until the next day, I'm not sure. There's also a couple of holes right here. These little holes, I'm just gonna go ahead and fill them in with Bondo. No reason to put a dowel rod in that. Those are 1/4 inch holes. Up here, there are a few other holes that I did not fill in with a dowel rod because once again, they are small 1/4 inch size holes, which are these 2 holes right here. If you remember on the last video, there was multiple locks on this cabinet at one point. These ones went through the rim of the coin door, and I'm just going to fill these in with Bondo. Even if they shrink back and you see these holes later, you're never going to see them because that ring for the coin door covers over it, so you're never going to notice it. I'm just filling them in just so that they're filled in. They don't need to be filled in, obviously, because you won't see them. But now let's get some body filler mixed up here. What we're going to use is a lightweight body filler, more like an icing, it's called. Let me see what I got up here. Don't mind the counter, it's a little messy. It's a bunch of car parts for this car I'm working on. But we're going to use glazing putty. This is a thinner putty. It's not as thick as like a Bondo because 90% of what's on that cabinet is just real minor imperfections. I will have to mix up some better stuff, thicker stuff for the those holes that I want to fill in. But we'll just use this little stool here and mix up some of this filler. So squirt some of this stuff out. Don't mix up too much. Depending on your temperatures that you're working in, it sets up fairly quickly. But I usually just mix up a little bit at a time, about that much, and I'll run some hardener on it. This is like a greenish color when it's mixed together. Another thing I like to show you people, usually, see how that's a little runny? I probably should have kneaded the tube back and forth a little bit to kind of mix it back up, but it'll be all right for this. Now when you mix your body filler, don't go in circles and try to mix it like that. Take it and fold it over, take it and fold it over. If you mix it in circles, that's all you're doing is creating air pockets in the body filler. And then that leaves pinholes. You get less pinholes by taking it and flipping it. You're kneading it together rather than stirring it. And you can see here, it's a nice consistent color. You want to try, you see, look on the squeegee here, there's still some yellow that's not been thoroughly mixed. So try to really get that off and go back and mix it. Try to mix this stuff up as best you can. And it does set up pretty quick. It's probably about 70 degrees in the shop right now. So I don't have a ton of time to get this on there. If it does start to harden up on you, don't try to keep using it. Just mix up some more. It's not like you're using a ton of it all in one shot anyways. So I'm just gonna go around to all the spots that I circled and just lightly fill them in. Don't go crazy. Don't go putting it on real heavy and have big clumps of Bondo everywhere, because that's just more you have to sand. Sometimes less is more. Sometimes it's all you need. You know, it's not a big deal to go ahead and put a second coat on. You know, sand it and put a second coat on. I do recommend sanding between coats. I see a lot of guys will just put a coat on, realize it's still thin, and just put an air coat on without sanding. I don't agree with that. I think it needs to be sanded down, because if you don't, I just think it's, you know, less likely to adhere to each other. But once again, that's just my opinion, and that's how I do it. Doesn't mean it's right or wrong. It's just how I do it, you know. Everything I'm showing you guys is just my way of doing these. It's not the right way or the only way to do it. It's just how I do it. It's just how I've done it over the years, and I'm comfortable doing it. You know, there might be better methods out there. I don't know. And you know, you don't need to have all these fancy tools and stuff like that to do what I'm doing. You know, just basic tools. I mean, if you don't have a big area to work, or an air compressor, or sanders and stuff like that, you can do it all by hand. It's just going to take you a little bit longer. You know, obviously I'm going to be able to do it a lot quicker because of what I have. And you know, you can get VA sanders that are electric. I actually have a cordless DeWalt one that I use for work. Works really well. I buy a lot of stuff for Harbor Freight. I have no problem with Harbor Freight tools. They definitely don't last as long as a better tool, but if you're only doing stuff like this here and there, who cares? It'd be plenty good enough. This is set up, pretty much drying already, so which worked out good because I ended up using it all. So we're gonna go back over here and mix up another batch. Take my paper towel here and wipe this off real quick. Another good practice is wipe your squeegee off. Don't let it dry and try to peel it off, because you end up just nicking the edge of this all up. Once you get nicks in the edge of this, then your filler just doesn't lay down as well. If it starts setting up on you real quickly, just take a rag with some lacquer thinner and wipe it down. And I'm not too worried about this part over here, just the edge that you use. Just try to get that nice and cleaned up. Mix up a little bit more. We got to finish that other side and a little bit on the front. Might be a little bit too much hardener in that, but it'll be all right. And once again, we're just going to knead it. We're not going to stir it. This stuff typically sets, you could sand in 10, 20 minutes, depending on your temperatures, your humidity and stuff like that. All that stuff plays a role in how long it takes for this stuff to set up and how much hardener you put into it. Hotter days, if it's, you know, 80, 90 degree summer day, I'm going to use less hardener than I am if it's 60 degrees. Because clearly a 60-degree day needs more hardener to let it cure. Now you don't want to over harden this stuff either, or it makes it weak and brittle. You gotta find that sweet spot. And that just takes time. Just from using it over the years, you get used to how it should look and how it should feel. Move you back over here. We'll get the rest of these spots filled in. And then we'll move to the front and put a coat on there. Like I said, just put enough on so you don't have to sand your butt off getting it back off. I see a lot of guys really put this stuff on there heavy and then they're sanding for hours. It's just a waste of time. I always say to myself, time is money. I know this is a hobby and this is, but you know, from regular work and stuff, you gotta kind of work quick. But like I said, anybody can do this. If you got a little bit of patience, a little bit of time, you don't need a lot of knowledge or anything like that to figure it out. There's plenty of YouTube videos out there of people doing stuff like this and working on cars and all that. Pretty much anymore, you can figure out anything. You got a little bit of handiness to you, you can pretty much figure out anything. That's how it is for me. If I can't figure out something, I go and start watching videos. And looks like I didn't mix up enough again, but that's all right, because I'd rather just mix a little more than throw a bunch away. Not too worried about the bottom of the cabinet right now. We'll get that when we flip it over. Up a little bit more, but once again, let's clean this off. Even though it's not dried yet, it's gonna dry quicker than what I'm gonna remix right now. So let's just get it off the squeegee. Now the proper way, if this stuff has been sitting for days, what you really should do is kind of go back and forth and knead it up. And what that does is the stuff likes to separate in the tube, and that's where that water comes from. So it's always good to kind of knead up your hardener. It just remixes it all together for you. And you saw how quick this last batch I just mixed dried, because remember I said I might have used a little bit too much hardener, and that's what happened, was it just cured a little quicker because of that. This cabinet's not going to take too long as far as body work goes. I'd imagine by tomorrow I'll be spraying primer on it. Gonna let it dry for a day or two and sand it down, and if it all looks good, we'll be ready for paint. If I sand my primer down and I still find some imperfections that I don't care for, I will touch them up with some body filler and then I will primer it again. A lot of guys won't re-primer it a second time, they'll just go ahead and paint over that. I'm not gonna do that, especially with this cabinet, because it's kind of a rare game and they didn't make a ton of them, so let's just do it right and not have to worry about that. So we'll come over to the front here, fill in these little nicks we have. This is a little bit of a dip here. I'm not gonna fill into that corner right now because I still need to sand that corner. I forgot to do that. And I'm not gonna fill in these holes with this stuff. We'll mix a different filler up for that. And don't get discouraged doing this stuff. It takes time. It takes a long time to learn it all. You know, you can do just as good of a job as somebody that's been doing it for 20, 30 years. It just might take you a little longer. But this is a really important step because you don't want to rush something like this, because this is what you see. You know, your artwork gets applied to it and everything else, so you want to have a nice, smooth, clean surface. And if you don't have the ability to spray paint, use nice, you know, foam rollers and just take your time. You can sand between coats of that other paint too. All right, that first coat is on everything. On all those. Let's go ahead and mix up some of that other stuff, and we'll fill in these couple holes for there and on the back where that latch was mounted. So we're gonna grab some other filler here. Basically just Bondo. This is just, we're gonna use this one. This is a lightweight body filler versus I have another one here that is a little bit heavier. Don't need the heavier one. This will be plenty good enough. It uses the same hardener as what I was just using with the other stuff. Get my can opener here. And we don't need a ton of this. We're only going to fill in those holes. Should be more than what we need. This stuff takes a little longer to cure. It doesn't set up as fast as the glazing putty does. Once again, knead it up here. Now where I put the dowel rods, a lot of guys will just put this filler right in those holes. And what happens over time is this stuff will shrink. And as it shrinks, you'll actually see a little line of where that hole used to be. And that just sucks. You know, 6 months or a year down the road, you look at the front of your cabinet and you can see where the old holes were drilled in the front of the cabinet. It's kind of disappointing when that happens. I'm going to fill in these front and back holes, and I'm going to do those screw holes on the side of the cabinet as well, where those metal corners were at. Now, I got to be careful. I don't want to get Bondo in this hole because this has a recess drilled in it. I'm just going to stick my thumb over it. I'd rather get it on my thumb than to fill that hole up with Bondo. Kind of smash it into the hole, work it into the hole so that it kind of gets deep into the hole and it's not just on the surface. Squeeze it off and stick it in the hole real hard. What that's doing is it's working it into the wood, getting it deeper into the cabinet. Get these screw holes. I know I'm going to be fiberglassing over here. More than likely the fiberglass will fill in those screw holes, but it's not going to hurt to put this on there. Okay, in the back here, fill in these couple where this latch was. Once again, keep working it into the hole. And if you look in the backside, you'll actually see it. This is already poking through the backside, the filler, because I worked it into the hole like that. What kind of sucks is this piece is kind of broken out here, where the, I don't know what they did with that. Probably when they were drilling the hole through the back door, they drilled through that. The nuts were probably in the way. I'm just gonna have to leave that for now. I don't know if I'm gonna end up messing with that or not. And also, let me show you here. You can see in the cabinet here. Take it off of here. By pushing it into those holes, see how it's coming through the backside of the cabinet? That's what you want to have happen. Because now you have 3/4 of an inch thick of that mud in that hole, which is less likely to pop out in the future. All right, it's been about 10-15 minutes. This stuff is set up. It's not sticky. You could touch it with your hand, your fingers, and doesn't have a sticky feeling to it. This glazing putty, I'm going to just sand this with 180 grit. That's all it needs. There's no reason to go down to 80 grit. This stuff sands down real fast and flat. You always want to use a filler that has a hardener. Don't use the old glazing putties that were red in a tube that you just squeeze the tube out and you smear it on, and then 5 minutes later it's dry. That stuff likes to shrink back on you, and it's really not strong at all. So I really recommend using something with a hardener. And we're just gonna go ahead and sand these down real quick. Once again, keep your sander flat on your surface. Don't go rocking it if you're using this kind of sander. Pretty much any sander you want to try to keep as flat to the surface as possible. All right, all those spots are sanded down. Let me show you what they look like. As you noticed, I started with this side, which was the first side that I spread my filler on. It's always good to start with that side first because obviously it's been setting the longest. For the most part, this side is just about done. There are a few little nicks, as you can see on these edges here. I don't know if you can see it in the camera, but there's a few little nicks around these edges. So I want to put another coat of filler on those spots. There's a pretty good one right here. Down in here. So these are just some areas I want to put another coat on. I'm waiting on this back until it sets up a little bit more. So let me go ahead and mix up a little bit more filler and we'll put it along those edges. And then I'm going to show you a trick on sanding those edges down. You don't want to use your electric or DA sander to sand those edges because the rotation of the sander will just blow the body filler right out of that corner, right out of those edges. So let's mix up a little bit more. Before I mix this, let me go grab a sanding block. A little 220 grit sandpaper here. I want to get these corners on this front that I told you I couldn't get with the sander. I'm going to blow this off real quick. Open the door here and blow this dust outside. It's only about 30 degrees tonight, a little bit cold out there. Particle board corners are the hardest to get square. They like to just keep chipping up on you. You have to be real careful with them. And on any of this stuff, if you second guess yourself and you kind of convince yourself into, oh, it'll be good, it'll be fine, that usually right there means you need to put another coat. As you can see, none of this stuff really takes a lot of time. It's pretty quick. Same thing with working on cars. You know, a lot of people drag out these paint jobs and restorations, and they really don't need to be. Yeah, there are times where you need to cure stuff, and it does need to cure for a little bit, but stuff doesn't need to cure for 6 months. Especially if you have the ability to heat up your products, keep them warm. You know, some of my best paint jobs have been on my own vehicles that I have barely any time to work on, so I just rush through them, and they end up turning out really nice. All right, we're gonna let those edges set up, and I will show you how to sand those down. I'll sand them with the DA sander first on the flat surface, and then we're gonna hand sand them with a block on the edges. By doing that, going back and forth motion rather than a rotational motion, it'll keep it from ripping it out. All right, while those sides are setting up here, I'm going to mix up a little bit of filler, a little bit more filler for those front top corners. Remember I had said I didn't want to put the filler all the way into the corner because I hadn't sanded all the way. Now that it's sanded, I'm actually going to put a better coat on those top corners. Use this thicker stuff. It's got a little bit of an indent, so I'm going to try to fill it in a little bit better here. Bondo that you buy at Walmart, Home Depot, or Lowe's is plenty fine. Just I like to use an automotive Bondo rather than, they make wood hardeners and stuff like that at Home Depot and Lowe's, but some of those don't have a hardener in it, and I don't recommend those. I want to try to get something that's going to cure fast. It's going to cure hard. Try to smooth it out as best you can. Clean up after yourself. Anywhere where it's hard to sand, try to wipe it off. Stuff is sticky, but it's no longer coming off on my finger. Dowel rod's not moving at all. We'll let it dry for a little bit longer, and then we can grind it down and put some filler over top of it. On my first video, I was going to show you the paint that I had mixed up, and somehow I cut it out of the video, or the video stopped recording. I'm not sure. Let me take you back there now while I got a minute while that stuff is drying, and I'll show you the color I had mixed up. Like I said, I took it. Here's a couple parts I just had painted the other day for that car that's out in the shop. A couple fenders, the hood, and a couple more front pieces. But let me walk you back here. And I'll show you what I had mixed up at the paint store. I do have this paint coat if anybody needs it. I have it written down here. Actually, I could just show you the label if you guys can read that or not. If not, I can always send it to anybody who needs it. But like I said, they profited the cabinet with their computer and came out with this scan of this color. So this is going to be as close as I can get it to my cabinet. Now, from what I was told, some of these Journey cabinets are different blues than others. I didn't know that, but supposedly, you know, they had multiple shades of blue. But this right here is the blue that my cabinet was when I received it. We cleaned off a little area and then used that gun to profit the color. So this is a little bit darker looking. It'll probably lighten up a little bit once it's sprayed. And then I like to use a Hot Rod Satin Clear. I just get this stuff from Summit Racing. It's just a satin clear finish. So once the color goes on, once I put the blue on and the black, I go back and I spray the whole cabinet with this satin clear, and it gives it a real nice eggshell type finish, which is what the cabinet should have been. Definitely was not gloss to begin with. I tried to go the laminate route. I do laminate some of my cabinets. But I just couldn't find a blue that worked. I actually ordered some laminate, and it didn't end up working out. It was way too off in color. So we're just gonna go ahead and do the blue paint. It takes a little bit longer, but it's the right thing to do anyways, because those cabinets were originally painted. But if you do, guys, laminate any cabinets, you wanna use a vertical grade laminate. I do have a cabinet that I might laminate, and maybe I'll just do it for the purpose of the show so that you guys can see it. That Turtles cabinet I have back there, that'd probably be a pretty good candidate to just laminate it with a satin black laminate, vertical grade, which is only like a 32nd of an inch thick. Let's check on our edges here and see if it's dry. That's already starting to set up. This is almost ready. This I'm gonna let it sit a little longer than I did these spots, just so that it gets a little bit harder. All these spots feel good to me now. I think we're good to go with all these spots. So once we get this back lip fixed up on each side, by that point we should probably be able to grind down these dowel rods and get a coat of filler on that. Then really that's all that's left is the bottom part of the cabinet. Get that body worked in. I do see a little nick here. I want to get that fixed. And sand this. A little rough right here, a little swelled up from maybe a little moisture over the years. I want to make sure I get that nick filled in. This is going to be satin black again, but this is a blue T-molding. If this were a black T-molding, you probably never would notice it against the black paint. But seeing that it's blue, it's going to be real obvious if it's, you know, the color between the two. There definitely is some bigger gapping going on in a little bit of this T-mold area. And once again, I'm gonna leave it. I'm not gonna fill it in, because every time I put body filler in there and I use the router to recut it, I end up blowing it all back out. So it's just kind of a waste of time. The hot glue gun works really, really well for fixing those spots. All right, we're gonna sand this filler on this back edge down. Just gonna do this surface, not the back side. All right, if you guys look closely here, you can see, sort of see, the body fillers kind of sticking out past the edge of the cabinet. See how it's overhanging there? So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna take some sandpaper on a block. It's 220 grit. Just wanna do is just wanna go up and down with it. Nice and gently. Don't go crazy. Putting a lot of pressure on it. You don't wanna crack the Bondo off. And just slowly work it, and you'll see those chips that are still showing, they just go away. If, like I said, if you use a DA sander that's spinning, it just tears it off the edge. All right, you can see, nice and straight now. You got a nice straight line, no chips on that edge. Let's do this side real quick here. Kind of hard to film this when I don't have a real big area I'm working in right now. Doesn't take very long. All right, that's it for that. Those edges are nice and straight now. No more nicks. Oh, a little bit more to sand right there. See how this is kind of overhanging a little bit? That's it. Always go up and down. Don't go this way. All right, continuing on. I let this sit for about 2 hours or so. Everything seems to be dry. I'm gonna go ahead and cut these dowels back now. Grind that down flat, and I can put a little filler on there. ground them down a little bit lower than the surface of the wood so that I could put a little filler on there and I don't have to worry about hitting that dowel rod again. All right, I'm gonna stop this second video here off camera. I'm gonna go ahead and put some filler on these. And on the third video, I'm gonna go ahead and finish up the body work on these upper parts. We'll get the cabinet tilted on its side and get that bottom corners fixed and stuff like that. My first video, I didn't realize that my camera was not taking a video in full screen. Neither is this one, but on the next video, it should be full screen. Thanks guys for watching, and I'm gonna go ahead and make the third video today so that we'll have the first 3 videos all made in one day. At this point, at the end of the third video, we should have the cabinet in primer. Thanks.